everyone, and welcome back to a new episode of Talking Out Aligned. As you all know, this is a show about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging across different industries in the United States. Today's episode will be focusing on virtual reality and DEIB with our guest Amir Berengian, the co-founder and CEO of REM5, a company that focuses on emerging technologies such as augmented reality, virtual reality, Web3, and the metaverse.
Before founding REM5, Amir received his bachelor's degree in the University of Minnesota Carlson School of Management for Corporate Finance. He spent over 12 years in investment banking and corporate finance with a focus on mergers and acquisitions. In his Minnesota-based VR company, his goal has been to find ways to positively impact the world with new technologies. From working with schools all the way to Fortune 500 companies, his designs and programs have impacted thousands of people from many different walks of life.
Similar to how computers and phones have come from an idea to an everyday necessity, Amir believes that the next logical step would be for emerging reality to become an accessible tool for everyone. Their 8,000 square foot facility hosts over 10,000 guests a year. REM5 has started to focus on education for companies to teach diversity, equity, inclusion locally and around the world, as well as K-12 schools. Their belief that VR is for everyone is exercised every day, with their technology helping train law enforcement, giving access to seniors, making sensory-friendly experiences for neurodiverse youth, and create immersive experiences to talk about privilege. This is just one of the few ways in which REM5 is contributing to the world of inclusion through the use of the metaverse and technology and virtual reality.
Now, as always, before we jump into our conversation with Amir, let's look at some statistics about virtual reality and DEIB. According to the Pew Research Center, 54% of technology experts believe the metaverse will be a regular part of daily life for 500 million people by 2040. 51% of companies are either in the process of implementing VR into strategy or have already implemented it into their business.
The number of VR users has increased from 22.5 million in 2017 to a projected 65.9 million in 2023. By 2030, it is estimated that about 23 million jobs will be using virtual reality as a modality of technology and communication. Arizona State University partnered with LA immersive company Dreamscape to create 9 modules for students. Half were given the equipment and the other half did not receive it. Students that received it were more engaged and they saw a 15% increase in grades through the use of the immersive metaverse experience of augmented reality and virtual reality.
The Los Angeles City Community College program uses AR and VR for full range of subjects from chemistry to English. 79% of the faculty reported increased student engagement and successful completion of outcomes. Morehouse College created VR courses during the pandemic called Morehouse in the Metaverse, which has now expanded to additional courses and prepping computer science students for technical interviews using AR and VR.
Thank you for watching the intro for virtual reality and diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging at Talking Out Aligned. Now we're going to get into the conversation with Amir Berengian of REM5 on all things metaverse, virtual reality, and social change. Hi all, welcome to Talking Out Aligned. Our episode today is about virtual reality and diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And we have with us Amir Berengian, who's the co-founder of REM5 Studios, which is an immersive technology company based out of Minneapolis in Minnesota. So we're going to find out about the world of virtual reality, which to be self-admittedly don't know much about. And I would love to know more about it and the work that you all are doing about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and about this word that's been floating around that I'd like to know a little bit more about called the metaverse. So tell us a bit about yourself and your company, your project, and work.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Fadia. Let's try to clear up some of those preconceived notions or confusion around the space today. So thanks again for having me. Amir Berengian with REM5. My journey in this space really started back in 2016 when I tried modern virtual reality for the first time. So when I use the term VR today, I'm talking about putting on a headset or goggles, or insert your favorite word here, where when you're in the headset, you're fully immersed in that environment and you can interact with that environment. And when I tried it back in 2016, I really became obsessed with the power of that technology to democratize experiences. So if we take the concept of being able to democratize experiences with experiential learning theory, or learning by doing, you have yourself potentially the most powerful learning and development tool. Yet when I looked around our community, I didn't see this tool being utilized for all these potential use cases, right? Think about K through 12 education, it's the magic school bus, or think about corporate America doing a lot of work on leadership skills, communication, soft skills. Those are all things that these tools can be used for, but they weren't being utilized because our industry does a really poor job of communicating what the value proposition of these tools are, and it's not accessible. So for me, who had spent my entire career in investment banking, completely unrelated to technology, looking at it from the outside in, I said, what problem can I help solve? And one of those was just frankly accessibility. So that's where REM5 started. It started by having a physical location. So I'm sitting in our 8,000 square foot facility based right outside of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Still to this day, it's one of the largest multi-purpose XR facilities in the country. And the reason that we go through the headache of operating brick and mortar is because people still need to see this technology in a way that's really carefully curated for them. And it can be intimidating. And so how do we break down some of those barriers? And so since we opened our physical location, we've had about 50,000 people through the space, and we're really focused on learning and development initiatives, both with K through 12, and then with corporate America. The area that I'm really passionate about, and what brings us here to this conversation today, is cultural competence, emotional intelligence, diversity, equity, and inclusion. As technology advances and it continues to replace more and more of the hard skills, more of the tangible skills, what are we left with as humans to contribute to the equation? It sounds kind of dystopian, but it's our ability to engage with other humans and have empathy towards other humans. And so that's where my passion lies, where I've spent a lot of time with this technology. And so in addition to our physical location, we also have REM5 Studios, which is our production house. So not only do we distribute immersive technology content, we also produce it in-house, which I'm excited to talk to you all more about some of the software that we've been building over the last 4 or 5 years.
Sounds good. That provides a bit of an overview of a field that is mysterious to me. And as you stated in what you just said in your introduction, that one of the biggest problems that I face as a person who seems to not know much about your world is the lack of, it's the intimidation of the unknown, where I don't know much about the technology. And I feel the communication strategies need to be that much stronger for people who are non-specialists. So for example, I'm not a person who knows much about VR, but for people to have a VR understanding, the communication strategies of the VR companies need to be really effective and inclusive. So I think that's sort of part of the game. And yeah, so please give us a little bit of highlights about the work that you do and your company does in terms of DEIB as well as other projects.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll kind of bifurcate my answer here. So one thing that's just kind of woven into our DNA is making sure we provide equitable access to these tools. And that starts with youth, right? I mean, a lot of adults, including myself, have all these, we're kind of boxed in terms of our thinking process, whether we like to admit it or not, whether it's consciously or unconsciously. And so as we embark upon this next generation of how humans interact with computers, because if you think way back, we went PCs made their way into our homes. Then we went to mobile devices, and now think how much of a profound impact those mobile devices have had on our lives, how we work, learn, play, socialize. The next iteration of that is going to be immersive technology, so virtual reality and augmented reality. And so a big part of our mission and responsibility is to make sure that the next generation that's going to be building these ecosystems is not just a certain demographic, not just somebody who has enough privilege to have access to these tools early on, and access to people that can teach them how to build with these tools. We spend a lot of time working with youth organizations. We spend a lot of time working with adult-focused organizations that are focused on underserved communities to provide access to these tools, get them up to speed. And we're in the process of building out curriculum right now to actually formalize that. So that's a really exciting piece of our business that personally is a lot of fun. The second piece is, how do we actually leverage these tools? This goes back to a little bit what I said a moment ago. How do we utilize these tools to create experiences that can build empathy? How can we utilize these tools to make uncomfortable situations that are good learning experiences safe and scalable and repeatable? So if you think about why a flight simulator makes sense to a pilot, with the advent of modern virtual reality, we can now apply a lot of those same concepts to situations in the workplace or situations at social gatherings. And so one of the tools that we built early on is a VR experience called Steps of Privilege. So you might have seen viral YouTube videos of this over the years, where a group of individuals, a class at a university or a team at a Fortune 500 company will stand in a boardroom or a park, and a facilitator will ask questions around. Then they all have a little bit of a privilege tie-in. So did you grow up in a household with two parents? Take a step forward, right? It starts to tease out some of the nuances of privilege that are religion, socioeconomic, sexual orientation, all of these things. And it starts to separate the room physically. And that can be really, really powerful. It can be eye-opening to see where your colleagues are in the room. It can be eye-opening to see where yourself ends up in the room. But you are, at some respect, leveraging or exploiting the story of those who are at the back of the room for the benefit of those who are at the front of the room. And so what we've done is we've created that experience in a completely virtual environment. So me as myself in the safety of my home or my office, I can put on the VR headset and I can go through that experience as myself and honestly answer those questions. And then when I take the headset off, I can bring that knowledge, that experience, those learnings to a deeper discussion with my colleagues without them actually knowing exactly what steps I was taking forward and backwards for during the experience. So it's really a simple use case of the technology, but we think a pretty powerful use of the technology. So that's a project that we started back in 2018. And it's now actually publicly available for free for consumer usage, which I'm sure we can link out to as part of the materials here, if anyone wants to try it.
Absolutely, we would love that, and we'll totally feature that in our website for talkingoutalign.com, and we'll have it as an add-on to this episode. It's going to be really cool for everyone. So tell us a little bit about the technology itself, because a lot of the questions that come up about virtual reality, and in my mind as well, is why do you think it's important for youth and adult populations to have access to virtual reality? What do you think it has the potential to solve that perhaps prior technology couldn't?
Yeah, I think we got to separate some of these buzzwords a little bit here, because there's a term metaverse, the M word, that gets used quite a bit. And I personally define the metaverse as human connection empowered by technology. So in that regard, AOL chat rooms were the metaverse. If we text each other, it's the metaverse. Mm-hmm. Anything social online, Instagram could be a version of the metaverse. And we're just kind of inching our way forward up this spectrum. And when you get to kind of the end of the road, it's that we're all in a fully immersive, interactive environment where we have a real sense of presence. So like Zoom right now, this is great for us to have a conversation and connect one-on-one and facial expressions and body language, but it's also at the same time not very natural of a way for us humans to interact. We've kind of just become okay with it over the last couple of years. But if you actually step back and think about it, there really isn't a sense of presence here. And so the metaverse, as most people are defining it now, is kind of this next iteration of the internet and how we engage with each other, and really a place where we can have a real physical sense of presence and connect in a way that's akin to the same way that we connect in the real world. So that's kind of this metaverse layer that at its simplest level, it's the next generation of the internet. Then you have different tools or ways to access the metaverse. So one of those would be a mobile device. Another one of those would be a personal computer or an iPad. The next generation of that is a virtual reality headset. So the VR is actually just the hardware in which we're accessing this next generation of the internet. So it's really just a continuation of this progression that we've been on really since the late 90s. Is kind of how I would view it.
Interesting. So that is probably the most interesting and comprehensive way I've understood the metaverse and virtual reality in a spectrum and a continuum. And that actually, your answer makes me understand that the work that I did for my PhD, I used a theoretical network called the actor network theory. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but that's essentially, I would recommend you look it up, ANT, actor network theory. And basically, actor network theory is at the base of the metaverse, is what I understand. It's the theory of interconnectedness between what in the actor network theory they call human actors and non-human actors. And the non-human actors are technology, or essentially anything that aids in the process of like running the show for humans. So yeah, I mean, I'd recommend you look up ANT. I think it may be interesting to you from a more theoretical perspective, and it may actually give you some sort of like, hey, that's a theoretical point that I can sort of use to like ground the metaverse work on. And I will certainly go and look up some articles. I'm sure there is people have written articles on ANT and metaverse now that I know the connection from your explanation of it. So, so tell me, what does diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging mean to you as like concepts and as a company? Like, how do you set out to doing that kind of work, and why do you think that kind of work is important?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the most important thing that we can possibly be thinking about as humans, right? I mean, why are we here? What's the point of it all? And it's for me, as somebody with Iranian heritage, you know, I've overall lived a fairly privileged life, and I recognize that. But I was also, you know, yesterday was the anniversary of 9/11. I was a freshman in college. 9/11. It was my first.
It was my second year. It was my second year of college. Yeah. No.
So,
hold on. It was my first year. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So we're the same year. So what a interesting time to have my first week, you know, out of the nest, all alone, at living in my dorm room, and that happened. And so it really started to change my perspective on the world, and start to think about things like you know, institutionalized systems, and things like unconscious bias, right? So I've kind of had that in the back of my mind through all my work. Through my work as an investment banker, I didn't really have a place to exercise that. As I moved into the virtual reality space, I had an opportunity to really bring those thoughts, those personal experiences, and that passion into my work through the two facets I told you about earlier. Just making sure we provide equitable access to these tools, because as we move into this next generation, there is, as you think about, to pick on a big company like Facebook or now Meta, they've done a lot of things that make the general public not trust them. They have a lot of perverse incentives, and they control that ecosystem and that platform. As we move forward into this next generation of the internet or of social media, there's going to be even more data available. The experiences are going to be more rich. The line between what's real and what's virtual is going to continue to be blurred. And eventually we'll get to a point where there is no line. And so it is the responsibility of all of us leaders in the space to make sure that we have the right voices, the right people at the table making those decisions. Otherwise, I have no reason to believe that we aren't going to run into all of the same problems we have with implicit bias baked into the underlying infrastructure of these computing platforms with this next iteration. So that's why it's really important to me and my kind of personal connection to the work.
So did you intentionally set out to do this work, or did it sort of happen along the way?
A little bit of both. I mean, I wanted to utilize these tools for learning and development. And as I thought about the business side of things, if we used these tools for hard skills, like fixing a piece of machinery or fixing a car, which we've done that type of work before as well, it's profound and very powerful, but it's not scalable or meaningful or as exciting personally. And as we move over to the cultural competence, emotional intelligence, the soft skills side of things, those are increasingly more important every day for corporations, for our communities, for humanity. And so I would say it's a little bit of both. It was, how do I match a passion with an actual business case? Because that's where you win.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So structural exclusion and structural racism is an issue across industries. And one of the main goals of this show is to show and highlight people from different industries and just show the commonality of the issues that are showing up over and over again, to make a point and a case that all of this is not unique. However, I do acknowledge that each industry and each platform has its own challenges that may not be shared across other industries. What would you say are some unique challenges that are presented in your world of work?
Yeah, I mean, not to keep coming back to it, but right now one of the biggest problems is accessibility and just general understanding, right? I mean, when people think of the metaverse, when they think of virtual reality, they think of games for the most part, and they really can't get outside of that box. And so for us, it's how do we, one, provide equitable access to this technology to inspire this next generation of big thinkers. And then second is, how do we empower them with these tools and build? So I would say that we got a long way to go. And the other thing too is back to this implicit bias concept. I have so many times over the last 5 years where we've run into issues with technology from a hardware and a software perspective, where it wasn't being used by a white male.
Interesting.
Right?
Tell me more about what, tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so think about like an avatar creator tool.
Yeah.
Right? A tool where you snap a picture of yourself and it auto builds an avatar for use in a virtual environment. Right? 3-4 years ago, we were testing a couple platforms, and I oftentimes when we test, I call up a bunch of buddies, because that's the best way to test things, folks that are outside the industry.
Yeah.
And had some individuals that were not white males have a really hard time building their avatar to look like them.
Of course. Yeah. Inclusive avatars. Yeah.
And so something simple, that's a simple problem to fix, but I think it's also a good indication in terms of the bigger problem, right? And you reach out to that team and you realize, well, it's 3 white males that are building the tools, and that's who they're testing in. They're testing it on their network, and they didn't know, right? And so you take that and you extrapolate that out into a lot of the AI that's being built right now that's going to power and underpin a lot of this. I mean, there's implicit bias wired into literally all of that, right? The hardware, for instance, the straps on the hardware fit one type of head and one type of hairstyle, right? So it's just something, again, that wasn't thought about on the leadership team that designed some of these tools. And so you're already seeing in a very simple way this bias being literally hardwired into the infrastructure.
Okay, so click on go.
Yep, it'll take a second to load it up. There you go. Can you see me now?
Not yet. I can see.
Oh, there you go. So this is just an intro page to the space. You click hello.
Oh yeah, I do see you. Oh my God, that's cool.
Yeah. So this is me right here.
Oh, and I'm moving.
Yeah, so you use WASD to move your character around.
Okay, that's awesome. So I guess I'm walking towards this. Where am I going? I'm going.
So you're looking at a map. So now turn to your left. Turn to your left, and you'll see me there. So come with me. So now think of this space as just a big museum or exhibition space.
Yep.
So if you come with me, this first room here on the right.
So it feels like I'm a little drunk. I'm getting used to sort of walking steady here.
And we tried to make it so you can get by with just using the keypad.
Yeah, this is cool.
So if you come
Almost like
into
an editing software, we do these
Companies use
keyboard
these
functions.
maps for decades to deny Black people loans and other services based purely on race. Historically speaking, owning a home and getting a college education is the easiest way for an American family to build wealth. But when Jamal's grandparents wanted to buy a house, the banks refused because they lived in
So
a
then when you leave that room, the audio will stop. But when you're close to it, it's kind of like being in a movie theater. The audio is playing.
from attending through legal segregation, their options for higher education were really scarce. Kevin's grandparents, on the other hand, got a low-interest loan to buy their first house and got accepted into a handful of top universities, which traditionally only accepted white students. This opened up a wealth of opportunities that they were able to pass on to their kids and grandkids. Even as late as the 1980s, an investigation into the
Am I
Atlanta
walking
real estate
properly,
market
or am I
showed
bumping
that
into
banks were
walls?
more willing to
You're
lend.
doing great. Keep going. Now turn right. There you go. And come down here. So here we have some data visualization, and walk up to.
Wow, that's cool. This is a really interesting way of learning, and I can see how this can be so engaging to people who are, I mean, just a much more engaging way of understanding and experience and understanding data and relating to data and immersing in it rather than sort of like being a passive reader, even though I'm sure there's a bunch of readers who will be really pissed off at me for saying that, but.
Yeah, but there's a lot of, and I am not a PhD in learning and development. I will caveat this with that. But in terms of retention and how our mind works, it's so spatial, right? Like when you're a lot of your memories are really anchored.
For bumping into you.
Oh no, that's okay. I mean, a lot of our memories are anchored in a space, right? A physical space. And so as you move through this space, you're kind of accessing different neural pathways than you would be if you're just reading the information.
Absolutely. I fully agree. Yeah, no, this is amazing. Like I can this is completely like a virtual exhibition. You're like totally hanging out with someone in a museum and learning, and or like a super high budget like classroom.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that we love to say, like, listen, to build this actual space and operate it in the physical world, you know, you need a $500,000, $1 million budget to do it. Here in the virtual world, we can do it for cheaper than that. And we can also scale it. Like this could reach 1 million people tomorrow, no problem.
Yeah, and it will definitely cut down on the boredom for many people before for like learning some stuff. For example, the topic of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is like not popular with many groups. And this is a really interactive way of learning about a topic that may be difficult for some people for a variety of
Male
reasons.
today is 21 times more likely to be killed by police than a young white male. And because of a legal doctrine called qualified immunity, in 99% of police killings, the officer is never charged with a crime. To understand this problem better, we need to take a closer look at how we got here. First, we all need to understand that historically speaking, the Black community has never really had a reason to trust in the police. Let's visit colonial America in the early 1700s. As the number of enslaved people grew in the South, many slave owners realized that they were vastly outnumbered. Fearing a revolt, they needed a way to prevent an overthrow.
If you want to come over this way, I can show you a 360 photo in here.
Where do you want me to go? Left or right?
Turn to your right.
Turn to my right. Okay.
Yeah. Come this way.
Oh God, I'm completely weaving. I'm direction challenged. Jesus. Wait a minute. Okay.
You're doing great. There you go.
Okay. Am I supposed to go right or left? Follow you?
Yeah, so turn left there. So
Okay.
now see these 360 experiences. So if you walk all the way, come over to the one by me.
Okay.
Turn left.
To the one that says 360, correct?
Well, there's two of them that say 360, but go up to the one on the left, keep going. And so it says George Floyd Square, Minneapolis, enter the 360 experience. So click on that button
Click
with
on
your
the
with your
button, okay?
mouse. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then now click and drag to look around. It's like a Google Earth.
Oh, wow. That's super cool. That's amazing. Wow.
And then if you click on exit 360 experience, you'll come right back.
Yeah. I'm still not done. Give me a second.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's very cool and very memorable and moving and all of the above. Wow. Well, thank you so much for this sort of a sneak peek into this experience. And I had one last question to wrap this up. So how do people contact you to, if you're an educator or if you want to use this experience, what's the process?
Yeah, for sure. You could either reach out to me directly at amir@rem5vr.com, or our primary email address is just contact@rem5forgood.com.
So that's really hilarious you said that, because when I gifted my husband an Oculus for one of our anniversaries, and that's funny, I didn't even consider that when I tried his Oculus on, it felt really weird on my head and gave me a headache. And I said, like, I literally couldn't do the exercise because it felt like I just felt uncomfortable and claustrophobic in it. And I really wonder whether the Oculus on my head was actually tested on heads that are like mine. And because I bet you I'm probably woman of color, young woman of color is probably not the audience for an Oculus headset. So I've never even thought about that, but it's probably what it is. I was super uncomfortable with it. So it's just interesting. So yeah, and I want to ask you a couple of questions to sort of wrap up. Any advice you have for newbies breaking into the industry from historically marginalized groups, being Iranian American, and sort of like any kind of advice you'd like to give people in the tech space on wanting a career in tech and inclusion, like the way that you're building?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the good thing about where we're going right now is there's a huge demand for people that know how to build with these tools. Huge demand. The demand outpaces supply, and that's going to continue for the foreseeable future. The other thing is there aren't people getting four-year degrees in the metaverse yet. There aren't people getting four-year degrees in how to do 3D modeling or Unity or Unreal Engine. And so there's an opportunity. We kind of are in a pocket right now for people that want to hustle and self-learn and go to YouTube University, which is where a lot of the people go right now.
YouTube University, I love that.
Yeah, I mean, our lead developer, you know, through networking and watching a lot of YouTube videos, that's where they learned how to develop, right? And so you can almost kind of leapfrog the system in a way if you have access to a computer and internet and have time to dedicate to it, which is really exciting. Because like me personally, I'm not huge on the, or the, let's just say the traditional education system didn't, you know, didn't hit really hard with me. So it's an exciting time. So it's kind of your cliche advice of get out there, network, meet people, and you can build your own future right now. 15 years from now, it's going to be very structured. There's going to be a pipeline of people, you know, going into to these industries. But right now, it's not. It's the Wild West. It is a small space, and I would say that for the most part, people are fairly open to having conversations with people from the outside looking in. I'd also say do your homework, right? I mean, there's enough. If this was 5 years ago, it's a different ballgame, but there's a lot of resources out there right now. There's a lot of articles being published. Do some homework, network, and learn by doing, right? That, I mean, that's comes back to like why we have this physical space, is because you need to actually do it to understand it. So that's my advice.
Sounds good. So where can our audience go to follow your work and your company's productions and projects that you've been working on and that are going to be working on for the next couple of years?
Yeah, for sure. We're not the best at being very public and promoting ourselves. We need to do better, but LinkedIn is probably going to be the best place going forward. We're going to do a lot more, put more effort into promoting ourselves on there. So you can follow me personally, Amir Barangian, on LinkedIn. Our company, Rem5 Studios, is also on there. And then Rem5 Studios has accounts on all the popular social media platforms. Twitter is probably where we're most active there as well. And then myself, I'm virtual_Amir on Twitter.
So a suggestion that I have for folks who are not from your world, but who wants to know more about your world is maybe you all could, since you're already doing work on education and development and leadership and all of that, maybe your organization can devote some time to creating some kind of like a monthly or like even 4 times a year like newsletter on like these are stuff that you really should know about the metaverse and that relates to our work. Like I think that would go a long way in explaining to people like sort of things, because, and also I think it would go with your mantra, which is pretty much like this is about letting people know about access. And sometimes access is, like you said, just about reading a newsletter and being like, oh yeah, I get it now. Now I can go and sort of figure this out and put it together. Because sometimes when something's unfamiliar, like the metaverse, for people who are not in the metaverse, meaning doing work actively in the metaverse, then just like one good article can change the game, right? So just a thought.
If there were more hours in the day.
Yeah, absolutely. But just a thought.
No,
Anyway.
totally. We do a lot of that in person. I mean, that's where it really resonates. We're on panels once or twice a week. We're hosting events here at our physical space to do that. And then also get people in a headset, an augmented reality headset, experience the metaverse firsthand. But I agree 100%. We just need more. We need good and we need responsible content. We need thoughtful content. And we also need to tie this all together. We need everything looked at and criticized through a lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is something that we don't have enough of today.
Absolutely. And one thing that I was going to suggest is if you have any interest, since I'm a professor, I have access to a lot of willing students who would be very happily wanting to intern for you for doing that part of the project. So it's an open offer. So anyways, so thank you so much for giving us an overview on REM5 Studios and the work that you all are doing. I'm looking forward to visiting your studio when I'm in Minneapolis, and because it looks super cool and I've never been to a space like that. So I would love to sort of find out what happens there. So thank you again, Amir. And I hope the audience can go to Minneapolis and to your online spaces and figure out more about your work.